I hope you're doing well, and thank you for tuning in. Today, I want us to look at the second half of Psalm 107, beginning in verse number 23, because I think there's so much application for us about learning and growing in our walk with God here. He says, "Some went down to the sea in ships, doing business on the great waters. They saw the deeds of the Lord, his wondrous works in the deep. For he commanded and raised the stormy wind, which lifted up the waves of the sea. They mounted up to heaven, they went down to the depths. Their courage melted away in their evil plight. They reeled and staggered like drunken men and were at their wits' end. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He made the storm to be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed." Now think about this. Of course, during this period of time, the ships were not what we know of today. They didn't have the same level of technology or navigation, but these were the ones who were adventurous. And I think what we see in this psalm is that when we go out into the unknown and we leave our comfort zone, that's when we begin to see the wondrous works of the Lord. Now, we Westerners, we love to be comfortable. I mean, people all around the world love to be comfortable. But it's only when you leave your comfort zone that you really grow to see the wondrous works of God. And I wanted to encourage you this today was, don't you want to see the wondrous works of God in your life? I mean, you can see in any life what you can accomplish, but don't you want to see what only God can accomplish? Well, you're going to have to get uncomfortable. You're going to have to get out of what's normal for you in order to see what only can be attributed to God. And look how God accomplishes that. He says that he brought them, he goes, the sea rose up and the stormy winds. And so life outside of the comfort zone, it can't be controlled. The seas rise up and they go down and they mount up to heaven. They go down in the depths. And it says, then their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunken men, and they were at their wits' end. Well, have you ever been at your wits' end? Have you ever had the circumstances of life bring you to the place where you are at your wits' end? Is that a good place or a bad place? Let me propose to you, being at wits' end is frequently a very good place for us. Because when we come to wits' end, it means we've exhausted all of our abilities. We've lost every illusion of being in control. And at wits' end, we come to see that God is our sufficiency. We've seen over and over again his steadfast love for us. But he also allows us to go through these great storms that we reel and stagger around and wonder, how in the world will we ever survive? Well, how did they survive? At wits' end, they turned to the Lord. And I hope that you will allow God to take you out of your comfort zone and let you experience his wondrous works in the depths. Bring you to the end of your self-sufficiency, that you might enter into the complete sufficiency of Christ, a gift of God's grace. He doesn't bring us to wits' end because he doesn't love us. He brings us to wits' end because he never intended for us to be the source. So invite him to take you on an adventure where you can see God do what only God can take the credit for. That you can come to the end of yourself and see Christ as everything, a gift of his beautiful grace. And at the end of that, he says, and he calmed the sea. He made the storm still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. Do you remember the story in the Gospels where Jesus says, let's get in this boat and we'll go to the other side? And there they were. They pushed off from shore and they were going to the other side. And Jesus was in the boat with them. And he went down into the bottom of the boat and he fell asleep. And these were fishermen for the most part. And they knew the sea. They'd been on it their whole lives. And they get going, and all of a sudden a huge storm comes up. And they're trying all of their fisherman tricks, everything they know about being on the sea. And finally they come to the Lord who's sleeping, and they say, Lord, don't you care that we perish? He says, oh, ye of little faith. And then he calmed the storm. And they were mystified. He has power even over nature. You see, they were growing. Why did God lead them into a place where there was a storm, where they would question whether he cared about them? Because he wanted to bring them to wits' end so that they would see that he was their sufficiency. Peter, in another story, learns to walk on the water and come to Jesus. He wanted to show him. And he got out of the boat and he kept his eyes on Jesus. And then when he looked at the storm, he started to sink. But God saved him. Listen, the storms are not God's punishment. The storms are what cause us to be dependent upon him. If you want to grow and experience everything that God has for you, you got to be willing to go out into the depths of the sea. You got to get out of your comfort zone, what you know, what's predictable. You got to forsake the illusion of control so that he can be everything. Well, there's much more to the psalm. He ends it with, whoever is wise, let him attend to these things. Let them consider steadfast love of the Lord. He begins with the steadfast love of the Lord. He ends with the steadfast of the Lord. Meaning, for us, the storms are not meant to destroy us. They're a gift of his steadfast love. They're not always enjoyable, but when we come to the end of self-sufficiency, we find the sufficiency of Christ. And God uses those storms to grow us. I hope you'll be on an adventure to grow with him and be willing to get a little uncomfortable so you can see the mighty hand of God working on your behalf. Have a great day.